Good afternoon, everybody. Anybody not ready? Good. All right, I'm Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, and we're here this afternoon to talk about a homicide that happened about a year ago. On November 19th of 2021 at about 7:30 in the morning, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office responded to a report of a deceased person in the grassy area along the Duke Energy power easement, which runs north off of State Road 580, kind of in that area north of Countryside Mall, and it would be to the area to the west of Countryside Boulevard. Detectives identified the deceased person who was found along the Duke Energy power lines, that power easement in there, as 16-year-old Megan Cooper. Megan's body appeared to have been dumped in the field, and it appeared that she had been there for a couple of hours at the time that she was found. Megan lived at 3145 Sandy Ridge Drive in Clearwater and was a freshman at Countryside High School. Detectives from our robbery homicide unit and the medical examiner's office determined that Megan died from a drug overdose. The autopsy also revealed that Megan had recently had sexual intercourse, but there was no indication of a struggle. Toxicology tests as a result of the autopsy revealed that Megan died from an overdose of fentanyl. Unfortunately, as we know all too well, fentanyl deaths are too common these days, and most people, I think, by now, hopefully, are aware of how dangerous fentanyl is. Now, fentanyl is dangerous, period. End of story, end of day. It is an absolutely dangerous drug that kills people. But one of the greatest challenges and one of the greatest dangers with fentanyl is when people take it without knowing they're actually taking fentanyl, because it is so potent and because it is so lethal in very small doses. Now, we see this, unfortunately, we see this time and time again. People who are addicted to drugs like heroin and cocaine, which are white powder substances, ingesting the drugs only to learn it was fentanyl or a combination of fentanyl and their drug of choice, heroin or cocaine, because it's all mixed in, and not solely their less lethal drug like heroin or cocaine. So what happens is that people think they're taking one drug, cocaine, heroin, whatever it is. And in some cases we see this, and we've seen it in the past where you take non-narcotic drugs like Xanax and others, but it's got fentanyl mixed into it and people don't know. And because all it requires is such a small amount, they take it and they're overdosing, and in some cases dead because of it. In this case, and think about this, what I'm going to tell you here is that it's astonishing that the toxicology showed that Megan Cooper had 26 nanograms per milliliter of fentanyl in her system. According to toxicologists, someone is dead, okay, rock hard dead, and can't recover once they have 7 nanograms of fentanyl per milliliter in their system. So that means that Megan had almost 4 times the amount of fentanyl in her body that was necessary to kill her, where there is absolutely no point of return. So detectives from our robbery homicide unit have been diligently working on this case for the past year to determine who gave Megan Cooper such a deadly amount of fentanyl, and by doing so, killed her. We knew that there was no way that Megan knowingly took such a deadly amount of fentanyl. Unfortunately and sadly, Megan used cocaine, but there was no indication that she used fentanyl. So this did appear to be one of those cases that I was talking about, where someone addicted to one drug, in this case cocaine, was given a drug they thought was their drug of choice, the cocaine, and when they consumed it, it killed them, because heroin and cocaine are 2 very different drugs, and they have to be used very differently. You can use cocaine in greater amounts than you can fentanyl, and when you take greater amounts of fentanyl, you end up with a situation where you're dead. So based upon this year-long investigation, a grand jury this past Friday, a couple days ago, indicted 25-year-old Robert Gullo, and his picture is the guy here to my right, for the first-degree murder of 16-year-old Megan Cooper. Gullo is the one who gave Megan the fentanyl that killed her. Now, Gullo, as you can see from this photograph, and that's a photograph from his time he was, I guess, booked into the Florida Department of Corrections, the state prison system. He's currently an inmate incarcerated in the Florida Department of Corrections, and he's serving a 40-month prison sentence for lewd and lascivious behavior on a child under 14. He's going to be transported to the Pinellas County Jail, where he will face the first-degree murder charge for which he was indicted this past Friday. Now, here's what we know happened. Gullo, as I said, who's in his mid-20s, and he lived at 2629 Bruton Court in Clearwater, not far from where Megan Cooper lived. And you can see we have a map here to your right that shows where Megan Cooper's residence was, where Gullo's residence was, and I'll get to and explain, but where her body was found. Now, Gullo sexually preyed on young teenage girls who he met online and befriended them by furnishing them drugs for sex. The Hernando County charge, and that's the charge for which Gullo is currently in the Department of Corrections, resulted from sex that he had with a 14-year-old girl who he met on the dating app Tinder. At the time that Megan died, Gullo had been charged in the Hernando County case, and he was out of jail on bond awaiting trial. Because he was out on bond and through a bail bondsman on the lewd and lascivious charge, he was wearing a GPS ankle monitor. That ankle monitor that he was wearing, because he was out of jail on bail from the Hernando County case, helped us prove that Gullo is the one that furnished the fentanyl to Megan Cooper that killed her, and that he dumped her body by the power lines. So further of what we know is on November 18th of 2021, Megan Cooper was last seen alive by her mom at her home, and that was a little after 8 o'clock, and Megan's mom went to bed, and Megan was supposed to be in for the night. So Megan's at home with her mom goes to bed, Megan's 16 years old, goes to Countryside High School, supposed to be in for the night. We also know that earlier that day, on the 18th, Gullo, this predator, sent Cooper a text message that stated, "We should," and I'm quoting, "we should hang out tonight, let's do coke and get effed up." That's a copy of the text message that's there. Cooper replied to Gullo's text message, okay, and that they could hang out later that night. Megan also spoke with a friend by phone that day, and she told the friend that she was going to do cocaine with Bobby, who is Gullo. And earlier that same day, in addition to sending Megan Cooper the text, Gullo sent, in essence, the same text to a different young girl, a 15-year-old girl, and he told this 15-year-old girl, quote, "We should hang out today, let's do coke and get effed up." Now, this 15-year-old girl decided not to meet with Gullo, and at that time rejected his advance. So during the day on the 18th of November of last year, Gullo and Cooper texted back and forth several times about how good the cocaine was that they were going to use that night, and they discussed having sex. Now, as I said, Gullo is a predator who was preying on as many young teenage girls as he could. And Gullo made arrangements to pick Cooper up, again, after her mom went to bed, and he actually did pick her up from her home at about 9:20 p.m. on November 18th. And we know this from a variety of sources of information, not the least of which is that GPS ankle monitor that Gullo was wearing. And again, he was wearing that because he was out on bond from the Hernando County lewd and lascivious case. So after he picked up Cooper, Gullo and Cooper arrived back at Gullo's house at about 9:30 p.m. The ankle monitor shows that Gullo stayed at his house all night. And at about 11:32, so they get to Gullo's house at about, about 9:30. About 11:32 on the 18th, Cooper texted a friend and stated, quote, "I just did so much coke and it feels so good." So Megan Cooper, 16-year-old girl, is at 25-year-old Gullo's house. They had texted all day about getting, quote, effed up and using cocaine and having sex. Mom goes to bed. Megan gets picked up by Gullo, goes to his house, and then she texts her friend that says she just did so much coke and how good that it feels. So 5 minutes later, so this text goes out at 11:32 p.m. 5 minutes later at 11:37 p.m., Cooper, and this is again after she had said that she had just used so much coke, Gullo texted that same 15-year-old that he had texted earlier in the day that he also wanted to hook up with, he texts her and he says, "I need you, it's an emergency." We know from the GPS monitor and other sources of information that Gullo remained at his house until about 6:00 a.m. the next morning, which would have been on the 19th. The GPS monitor shows that at about 6 a.m., Gullo traveled from his home to the power lines exactly where Megan's body was found, and then immediately traveled back home. So you can see again on the map, he went from his home to the power lines, dumped her body, and went right back home. Now remember, Gullo texted the other girl at 11:37 the night before and said that she had ingested the cocaine and that he had an emergency. So what it appears is that Gullo kept Cooper's deceased body in his home all night before taking her to the field at 6:00 in the morning. As I said earlier, DNA evidence from the autopsy also establishes that Gullo had sexual intercourse with Megan. We interviewed Gullo early on in the investigation. He admitted knowing Megan Cooper, but he denied seeing her or communicating with her at all on November 18th or November 19th. And in fact, he said that he had not talked with her in over a week. Now, the fact that a guy like this, a predator who's preying on these young girls, is a liar, that's not surprising. But the next thing I'm going to tell you isn't only surprising, it's appalling. And if nothing else, hands down shows what a predator and a sick guy this person is. So on the 18th, Megan dies at Gullo's house. He keeps her body there all night, takes her to the power lines the next day. And remember, this is a guy that gave a 16-year-old girl fentanyl that was 4 times the strength that would kill someone. And he, in fact, killed her. He had sex with her. Somewhere in the middle of all that, as I said, he kept her body at his house all night. He dumped the 16-year-old in the field. And Gullo, within hours of dumping her body in the field, was back on his phone, texting that same 15-year-old who he had texted the day before, who rebuffed his request to meet, the same one he texted that night when Megan died and he said he had an emergency. He's texting her again within hours the next morning, asking her to meet with him for sex and drugs. So in sum, you had Gullo had just killed one teenage girl with the fentanyl, and with hours was again trying to induce this other 15-year-old to meet with him so he could give her the same drugs that killed Megan and have sex with her. So the grand jury on Friday, as I said, indicted Gullo on charges of first-degree murder and unlawful sex with a minor. Megan Cooper thought that she was using cocaine, but as we know, the toxicology showed that she had absolutely no cocaine in her system whatsoever. This is another situation where somebody is thinking they're using one drug. It was in fact another drug, and it was a very, very toxic amount of that drug. So to everyone out there, number one, don't use drugs. If you're addicted, there are resources out there to help you. But I know it's easier said than done to beat addiction. Addiction is a terrible problem that people have. So it's against this backdrop, especially to the young people who are easily preyed on by older people. Don't take drugs from someone like this. You have no idea what's in it. And in the case of Megan Cooper, at this guy's hands, it will literally kill you. So this is a sad situation. It's a sad case. Thanks to a lot of hard work by members of our robbery homicide unit, detectives over the last year, we've been able to hold Gullo responsible for this, bring justice to Megan and to her family. But fentanyl is a bad drug. And unfortunately, we see this time and time again. And I'm very thankful under these circumstances we're able to hold him accountable for it. So I'll take any questions that you have.
At this past Friday, when the grand jury indicted Mr. Gullo, he was already in the Department of Corrections.
Serving 40 months for lewd and lascivious for sex he had with the 14-year-old in Hernando County.
Have you all got a chance to, you personally, the detectives, talk with Megan's family and obviously let them know the news and just what are they saying, how are they feeling?
Yeah, you know, detectives have talked to her mom last week and as early as this morning. I think that they're relieved that somebody's being held accountable for this and they now know what happened to her.
I have a question about him. So he was previously, for that loot in the city of Sharjah and Hernando, he had been arrested for that out on bond with a GPS monitor. When did he go back in? I guess before the Department of Corrections, because now he's currently serving the
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly when he went back. So that case, so again, he was out last November. He was out on bond. So that case would have been disposed of in Hernando County sometime, I believe it was earlier this year. And he was sentenced to 40 months in state prison. So he came off bond, he surrendered, and he went to state prison where he was serving that 40-month sentence. Obviously, I hope and expect that he'll never see the light of day again, and he'll get convicted of this first-degree murder charge, and he'll get sentenced to life in prison, which he should. I mean, you can see this. I mean, this guy's a predator from, you know, he's walking around with an ankle monitor because he's having sex with a 14-year-old girl. He's texting these other young teenage girls for sex and for drugs and wanting to party with them, and you can see some of the explicit messages back and forth. He's a bad guy.
You see this in the community here in Pinellas County, and how often and how prevalent is fentanyl?
Unfortunately, it's extremely prevalent. And some people knowingly use fentanyl. They buy fentanyl, they like to use it. And of course, the question then becomes why? Well, one of the biggest reasons is that it's cheaper than heroin and it's a cleaner high than heroin, so people like it as a drug of choice. If you know what you're doing with it and you take it in small doses and you take it, I'll put this in quotes appropriately because there's nothing appropriate about it, then you can take it without killing yourself. But the majority of people don't know how to use it. And this is why we find people literally every day sitting in their bathrooms at home or on the floor in the living room or wherever it is with a needle stuck in their arm dead because they think they're using cocaine or they think they're using heroin or they think they're using something else, but it's fentanyl. And this is where you see in some of the poly drug labs in Mexico and other places where they're producing these drugs, where you've got multiple drugs, including fentanyl, and this is where it ends up in some of the pills like Xanax, and it ends up mixed in with some of the other drugs, and then people don't know what they have. So when that occurs, or if somebody gives somebody fentanyl, they know it's fentanyl, and the other person uses it like cocaine. In fact, I tried to blow it up here to show you, but it wouldn't come out, is that Megan actually took a picture of the line of cocaine that she thought that she was snorting that night. But that wasn't a line of cocaine. That was a line of deadly fentanyl that 4 times the amount, 7 nanograms is going to, like I said, according to the toxicologist, you're dead, okay? Rock dead. You ain't coming back. You ain't gonna, no Narcan, nothing else. 7 nanograms, you're in trouble. She had 28 nanograms.
So it was straight fentanyl, not cocaine mixed with fentanyl?
Absolutely. And that is unusual. Usually what we see in these cases is you'll see a mix of drugs, but she had absolutely no cocaine in her system. That poor girl and then she did it and she got, texted her friend and said, oh, this cocaine is good. Well, it wasn't cocaine she was taking, it was fentanyl.
Can you talk a little bit about what the sexual predatory aspect of this case is and kind of what your message to parents are at this point with who their kids are talking to?
Yeah, talk to your kids, make sure that they're aware. I mean, this guy is a sexual predator, and the drugs for him were the means to get the sex. And you can see this, throughout his communications. Look at the Hernando County case. You can see that what he was doing, and these are all young girls. So he's 25 years old, and all these girls are 14, 15, 16. They're vulnerable, easily influenced. And, unfortunately, equally as sad is that, they become drug users, they're addicts, and, they need help. And that's why I say, what I say to them is that I understand it's hard. I understand what addiction is and the medical condition that it is, and it's very, very tough. But there is help out there. You need to ask for it. There are people there that really care and want to help you out. But if you can't get there, don't be taking drugs from people that you have no idea what it is, because it will kill you. And there's no coming back from that. So it's a very dangerous situation when you take drugs from somebody and they're telling you it's one thing, but you have no idea.
Sheriff, do you have reason to believe that he knew what he was offering Megan was not cocaine?
I can't really comment on that. I don't know, and I just say, and I don't say this to be flip, or it doesn't matter, and whether he did or not makes no difference. And the fact is, you can see this type of conduct that this guy was engaged in, and at the end of the day, he didn't care, and he could have cared less. And I've seen a lot over the years, but you take a guy that takes this 16-year-old girl to his house, gives her what he says is cocaine, gets her high so he can do things to her like he's commenting about on there, and she dies. He keeps her in his house. It's obvious that he had sex with her at some point in there. It dumps her in the field, and within a short period of time, hours, he's going back to the other girl, trying to get her to give her more of the same drugs and have sex with her too. I don't even know what to say to that, other than it's appalling.
Did he meet Megan on Tinder as well?
Well, I don't know where exactly. It's through social media. I mean, that's where he was meeting all of them. That was his, social media, unfortunately, and where all these young girls are, that's his playground. And it is his recruiting source for getting these kids. And he's 25 years old, and unfortunately, the young girls, attracted to the older guy. He's got drugs. It's just a bad situation. All the ingredients there were just terrible.
Sheriff, do we know where he's getting the drugs from, the fentanyl?
No. Don't know. He wouldn't cooperate with us at all. I mean, he's a liar from the get-go. I mean, he told us he had talked to her those 2 days, hadn't seen her in weeks. He was totally uncooperative.
In his home, did he live in that home by himself? Was there any other drugs found in his home?
So we just put this case together. So he's been in prison since we've been able to put the case together. So we have not conducted a search or executed a search warrant at the home. So we haven't seized any of the drugs. He lived at that home with his father. So we lived in the home.
Question that is related to another case involving one of your deputies out in Tampa. Do you believe that that deputy that pulled over Tampa Chief Mary O'Connor acted appropriately, and will he face any disciplinary action at all?
I'm surprised it took you that long to get to that question. And I hadn't decided whether I was going to answer that question or not, but I'll answer it. Deputy Larry Jacoby did absolutely nothing wrong. I stand by him 110%. The person who did wrong was Mary O'Connor. It's had its consequences. The mayor's acted. Tampa's handling that. That's their business. Larry Jacoby did nothing wrong. He did his job, and while she asked for a favor, he didn't give her a favor. He handled that as he would have handled any other like situation, any other like traffic stop. People think that just because you got stopped by the cops that you're going to get a ticket, and that is absolutely not the case. Is that we stop a lot of cars all the time, and in very few of those cases, very few of those situations we give tickets, especially when it's something like this. Think about this, what this is. It's a golf cart. They were about 100 yards from the entrance to their gated community. The only reason why they popped out was because the restaurant they were trying to go to within the gated community was closed, so they went across the street to get some food from a restaurant, and they're going back and they're 100 yards away. Who cares? It's not felony no tag on a golf cart. It's no tag on a golf cart. So the outcome wouldn't have been any different if she had just kept her mouth shut. Is that unless it was aggravating circumstances or extenuating circumstances, that's a warning all day long. And I hear all the rhetoric, I hear the people running their mouths and all this, is that if she was not a cop and she hadn't asked that she would have got a ticket. No, she wouldn't. Not under those circumstances. Now, that doesn't mean anything other than what she did is unethical, it's wrong, it's all of those things. And she's paying the consequence for that. She shouldn't have said it, she shouldn't have done it, none of that should have happened. But to say that Deputy Jacoby did anything wrong is absolutely untrue. And so, because I figured you're going to ask these questions, so think about this for a second. Is that in 2020, in the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, we conducted 81,862 traffic stops. 81,862 traffic stops. We issued citations 12,597 times. That's not even 20%. In 2021, 86,146 traffic stops. Citations, 15,305. This year, year to date, we've conducted 91,473 traffic stops. citation 16,766. So I don't want to hear that she got the break just because she was the Tampa police chief. Had nothing to do with it. The outcome would have been the same. The absolute majority of the time, and only less than 20% of all the traffic stops we do issue tickets. Again, because there's no big deal, is that all we're trying to do is educate people. We want to get the behavior right. We don't want people running around with no tags on golf carts. We don't want people running stop signs. We don't want, but this is not a big deal. And I can tell you with certainty that the outcome wouldn't have been any different. Now, again, what she asked for, she didn't get. The problem is that she asked for it. She asked for special treatment. She asked for privilege. She asked for special consideration, and then, of course, followed it up with, if you ever need anything, you know, come on, everybody can see what all that is. But that's on her part, not on Deputy Jacoby's part. And I stand by him 100%. He did nothing wrong. So I want to answer all those questions. Anybody have anything else? Good. All right, thanks. Appreciate it. Yep.